I lived in this house for about 7 years, and I have a lot of stories from it. For some background, this is in a small town in central Texas. The house is a 1-story, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, with a front and back living room and a nice sized backyard with a palm tree, gazebo, and a shed converted into a bar. It was right across the street from a Catholic church and cemetery, and after we moved out, we found out the property used to be an orphanage in the 1960s that shut down because before that it was a funeral home with a crematorium that the orphanage was using to dispose of the bodies of the malnourished and abused children living there. Me and my immediate family, were initially hired to clean up the house after the previous tenants trashed it. By trashed, I mean trashed. The carpet when we cleaned it was a light beige color, but it started out black. There were human-sized holes in the walls, as if someone was slammed repeatedly all through the house. Dead chickens and other small animals were all over the floor, along with black candles, pentagrams on the walls and floor, and some mystery blood smeared on the back closet of the master bedroom. And how did we feel comfortable enough moving in after all we'd found? Well, when it was cleaned up, it was a really nice place, and the rent was only $4.50 a month. We should have known just based off the low rent. First incident. It was our first day in the house. I had most of my stuff in already, so my parents told me to wait at the house while they went to our old house with my siblings to get more stuff. I decided to take a nap after putting a few things on my dresser. In the center of the dresser, I put a Mary candle my mum had given me. It might be important to note that most of the satanic stuff was found in the master bedroom that had a walk-in closet, dressing room, and its own bathroom. This room became my room because everyone else was too scared to even set foot in it, including my parents. The whole 7 years we lived there, the only time anyone else but me set foot in the room was before we moved in while we were cleaning the house. My little brother got the middle bedroom, and my sister got the room next to his at the end of the hall, next to the other bathroom, and my parents opted to turn the back living room into their bedroom. After arranging my stuff on the dresser, I laid on my bed to take a nap while waiting for my family to return with more stuff. Not 2 minutes after I shut my eyes, the candle slid off the right side of the dresser to the floor with a thud. I was a little freaked out, but as I was by myself, I tried not to, so I tried rationalizing it, saying it was the wind or my dresser is crooked or slanted. I checked the dresser by pulling it away from the wall a smidge and putting a ball in the center to see if it rolled, and it didn't. Then I checked all the doors and windows to make sure there wasn't a draft or something. I put the candle back in the center and laid back down. Not a minute or so after I shut my eyes, the candle slid off the left side this time, like someone was sliding it and fell. I said nope and ran outside and waited on the porch till my family got back. When they questioned why I was outside, because it was summer and Texas is hellishly hot in summer, I replied that I wanted some fresh air and sun, trying to play it off so they wouldn't think I was crazy. The second incident. This was after we had been living there a few months. I was asleep in my room with the door open because it made me feel better, and the rest of my immediate family were gathered in my sister's room down the hall, telling each other ghost stories because it was close to Halloween. My mum said something along the lines of, "You'll better stop telling that stuff before something happens." Right after she said that, my door slammed shut and I started screaming. My mum urged my stepdad to go check on me, but he said, "You go check on her." So eventually they both came to check on me. They said once they opened the door, they saw me sitting up in bed with my eyes open, but glassy, and not focused on anything. I kept saying, "Get off me, help." They were too scared to enter the room, so from the door, they switched on the light and said, "Get out." At that moment, they said a black cloud lifted off me, and I fell back in bed, with my eyes closed fast asleep. Then, they freaking left me there because they were too scared, and told me about it in the morning. I knew they weren't lying because the dream I had the night before matched up with what they were saying, and they both looked kind of pale when they were telling me. Scaredy cat jerks leaving me in there. Incident 3. We have a family friend named Don. For some background on him, he was a family friend as long as I can remember, but some would say he's a bit of an odd character. He distrusted cars with a passion, so he rode his bike everywhere, even if it was 30 miles away. He also lived in an abandoned house and used a toilet seat over a bucket since there was no actual toilet, and set up his own irrigation near a stream to the house so he could have water. He was a kind soul, and we loved it when he came to visit us. We mostly went to visit him, but sometimes he'd bike the 25 miles himself for a surprise visit. On this particular day, he came in the morning, and by midday, my mother and Don were chilling on the front porch while they were drinking mixed drinks. I had my sweet tea. My mum finished her drink and asked Don if he wanted another, as she was about to go inside. He said sure, why not, and she went in. Not 30 seconds later, my mum came from the side of the house with different clothes on and walked up towards us. What's weird about that is, to come from the side of the house, she would have had to have gone all the way to the back door and then come all the way round. We said, "What are you doing? I thought you were going to make drinks." She said, "Don't worry about that, we can just talk." She proceeded to talk about death and suffering, kind of in a laughing manner, as if she found it enjoyable. We didn't say anything while she talked, because we were still wondering how she changed her clothes that fast. Suddenly, in the middle of her talking, she said, "I gotta go," and sprinted around the side of the house. Not 30 seconds after that, my mum came back through the front door with 2 drinks in her hand and her original clothes on. We both stared back, and we told her that she had come around the house with different clothes on talking crazy. She, of course, didn't believe us and thought we were playing a joke on her. We dropped the subject and went back to chilling. After a bit, I wanted to go ride my bike. My mum was pretty strict growing up, so the only place I could ride my bike was the church and cemetery parking lot across the street. I begged Don to come with me, since none of my school friends were allowed over, so I wanted the company while he was there. My mum told me no, of course, but he said it was alright, and we set off to ride our bikes around the parking lot because that was as far as I could go. After a while, he said, "Hey, I want to show you something." I said, "Okay, let's go to the grotto first," and we biked down to the grotto behind the church. We sat on the bench there, and he asked what the grotto was for, and I told him you could pray or just think if you want. We sat in silence for a few minutes till he said, "Follow me." He led me down to the cemetery part, and we stopped in front of a grave. He said, "That's my brother right there. He died when he was a young man." I said, "I'm sorry, Don. What was he like?" He told me, then started crying and said, "The angels have been talking to me, and they said that he's waiting for me." I asked, "What do you mean?" "I'm gonna die soon, sweetheart. The angels have been telling me so for a while now." I said, "Are you sick?" "No, I'm not, and I don't know how I'm going to die. I just know my time is coming soon." I was like, "No, you're not gonna die, Don. It's okay. It'll be okay, and it's okay to be scared." We hugged and stood there in silence for a little bit. Then wordlessly, we came back to the house. He spent a few more hours, then biked back home. Incident 4. A few months after that weird day, we were about to go to sleep when my stepdad got a call. It was Don's mother telling us that he had gotten hit by a drunk driver whilst on his bike. They couldn't even find all of him. That's how hard he got hit. Everybody started crying and freaking out. Suddenly, a trash can in the kitchen we were all in started shaking. We froze, and my stepdad screamed, "Leave now. You're not welcome here." And it stopped. After a few minutes of all of us standing around, miserable, we shuffled off to bed. I thought back to what Don had told me, and I cried into my pillow all night.
When I was a teenager, I was often home alone as my dad spent a lot of his time at our summer cottage with his girlfriend. I was responsible for the house, and if I needed to be informed of anything, my dad would call our home landline phone. Sometimes it would be about how to handle the fireplace on colder nights. Sometimes just to ask if the house was still in working order. One night, the phone rang, and instead of the normal going up the stairs to pick it up, I got a really bad feeling. Like if I picked up, it was going to be really bad. Like I should not answer the phone. I shook the feeling away because if my dad was calling this late, it had to be important. Only when I picked it up, it wasn't my dad. It was this not a human voice saying,
"Hello."
I admit to smashing the phone back onto its holder and not wasting much time to get my shoes and jacket to run out. Yeah, I apparently scare easy. Fast forward 2 years. I'm in my first apartment and I have my own mobile phone. I was walking my brand new puppy when I got a call that went straight to voicemail. I got the same dread feeling, even though it was a sunny day and I was outdoors. I played my message and I had one from my grandma and one from unknown number. I played both. The one from my grandma was just normal, like, "Call me back when you get this." And then when it got to the other one, it was the same
"Hello."
in a not a human voice that I had heard a few years ago. I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is 100% true. The only way I can describe the voice is that it was between a growl and a speaking voice. This is something I don't tell people. Not because I'm a believer in paranormal, but because it sounds so weird. I also still don't like to be at my dad's house alone. It's a creepy circus of its own, but the phone calls still bother me, even though it's like 17 years ago.
For context, I'm an only child. My first encounter was when I was 5 years old in my bedroom. My bedroom was located in the far part of the house. Of course, my bedroom was pretty secluded. My bed was one of those old spring mattresses that made sounds every time you moved and was placed against the wall in the far corner of my room. Remember these details for later. Mysterious incident. To set the scene, it was the night before my first day of kindergarten and I was awake late at night. Not from excitement, but because I had insomnia, and this was before my parents even knew. It was around 3 AM and I was watching Adult Swim. My parents were pretty much hippies, so practically no restrictions on TV. And while I'm laying down, I hear my mattress creaking. I just remember thinking that it was odd because I didn't move at all to make a noise. Without moving, I shift my eyes down to the end of my mattress to see a literal indentation on the edge. A butt indent. You would think, being a 5-year-old girl, I would have been so scared and run to my parents' bedroom. Wrong. I don't know why, but I wasn't scared. I was chill and figured whoever or whatever this thing was just liked watching TV too. I realized that after a couple of episodes of Family Guy, I should probably get to sleep before school, and I sat up, looked at the indent in my bed, and said, "I need to go to bed for school in the morning. You can stay if you want, but I have to turn the TV off." The indent slowly lifted, as if they were getting up from my bed, and I felt its presence disappear. So what did I do? Well, as an unbothered 5-year-old, I went to sleep and kept that night in the back of my head. I didn't know what a ghost or anything paranormal was. I know a few weeks passed, and I hadn't seen it since, but I started to sleepwalk after that night. I'd sleepwalk everywhere in the house, but I would frequently sleepwalk into my parents' room, open their closet door, enter, and face towards their bed. Don't ask me why, because I didn't even know this occurred until family members and my parents would ask me. I was very small and had hair that went past my butt. I was giving Cousin It grudge vibes for sure. My friend even said that one time she slept over at our house and remembers waking up to me facing towards her while she slept on the couch. Playdates in the dark. Although this would occur when I was asleep, during the daytime I would come home from school and be babysat by my grandparents in the afternoon, and my younger cousin would be dropped off a few hours later. Usually I would stay away from the back of the house until it was time to sleep. One day I was going to use the restroom, and the only sunlight that lit the hallway would come from the bottom of the door. As I walked down the hallway, I see a shadow as if it stepped in front of the door. I knew this wasn't anyone in my household because my grandparents were usually busy in the front of the house. I calmly made a U-turn and forgot about having a pee. I thought that if this wasn't going anywhere, then maybe we could be friends and play. Could you tell I was only a child? I'd close all the doors in the hallway and sit by my parents' door with my Simba stuffed animal that also rattled. Ask to play with me, slide my Simba to the opposite end, and it would slide back to me. I was so excited to have a friend to play with. This happened until I moved to California with my mum. I never told anyone about my friend. Later to learn that my uncle slept in my room around the World Cup games, and my quote-unquote friend spooked my uncle out 3 times within a couple of hours. Ever since then, when I visit my dad in Texas, I don't feel welcome in my room. I'm not sure why, but it feels like I'm being watched, and overall in a bubble. And what's even more messed up is that my Simba has disappeared and it's nowhere to be found, and I still sleepwalk. I'm 22 years old now. Since my first paranormal encounter, I've experienced so many more, to the point where I can at times see and hear people who aren't there, things flying across the room in a home I grew up in, and much more.
So, I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through Reddit, and all of a sudden an ear-piercing shriek rung out. I froze and immediately messaged my other half, who was upstairs. "Did you hear that?" He comes down and sees me ashen-faced, sitting frozen on the sofa. Our first thought is, someone is hurt. We live in the middle of nowhere. Behind our house, there are huge orchards and some woods, and not long ago, there were 2 murdered women found in our area. One crime was very high profile in the UK, and the other locally. We instantly worried that some poor woman was being attacked, so we grabbed a torch and prepared to phone 999. Nothing outside. I was very shaken up, so other half went to the neighbors and adjoining house, and didn't hear anything, not a peep. The neighbors on the other side who came out to fill his wheelie bin said the same. I was dumbfounded. It was so loud. It sounded like it was coming from inside the house, it was that loud. Neighbors suggested a fox. If anyone has heard mating foxes, you'll know that it sounds awful. But this was not a fox screech. I have heard them many times before. And it wasn't a cat either, nor the pipes. The tally wasn't on. And I wasn't listening to music or a podcast. It was a woman's scream. After ruling out logical things, I started to wonder whether or not it was paranormal. Although this thought had already crossed my mind because the scream instantly brought back a foul memory that I tried very hard to repress. Many years ago, when I lived with my mum, I saw through the living room window a car parked outside the house that I thought I recognized. It looked like my granddad's car. There was a woman sitting in the back seat. I peered through the window to see if it was my nan, aunt, or cousin. I was excited for an unannounced family visit. Then the woman, who did look a little bit like my aunt, turned to look at me through the window. I could see that her face was ashy grey. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide, with her jaw dropping further than it should be able to. Then, right in my ear, the loudest, shrillest scream I'd ever heard. I dropped to the ground, out of sight of the window and the woman. Mum found me on the floor. I don't know how much time had passed, but I was too scared to move. The next morning, we did get the news that Granddad had died in his sleep. Years later, I learned about the Banshee. For anyone who doesn't know, the Banshee is a figure in Irish and Welsh mythology. She is an omen of death. Before a death or bout of fatal illness or injury, she will appear to the forsaken person's family and scream or wail. I live in England, but my family on both sides are Irish, and on my father's side, Welsh. I had heard the term Banshee, but didn't know what it meant. I had only heard it used by older relatives who were describing a particularly unpleasant or shrill woman. "Would you get a load of her squawking? Sounds like a bloody banshee." I assumed it was an old-fashioned term for a noisy woman. There are a lot of those. It was only a few years later, when I got interested in mythology, that I found out what the term actually means, and that I had encountered one. So, was that what I heard the other night? I texted my parents to see if they were okay. "Sorry it's late. Weird question. You good?" They both replied that they were fine. My nan, my only living grandparent, has cancer and is about to have an important scan. My dad was fine, but also needed a scan. My mum was doing well, but informed me that a great aunt had died, although she passed 10 days before the scream. So, if it was for her, the Banshee was very late. None of these things were out of the blue. Nan has been sick for a long time. Dad is getting on in the years and scans are regular. And the great aunt was 90 and had been in hospital for some time, leading up to her passing. So the Banshee, if that is indeed what the scream was, couldn't be related. Sorry for the essay, and thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm honestly quite anxious, and it's still ringing through my head. Any thoughts or suggestions, paranormal or not, would be greatly appreciated.
I grew up in the 90s in Minnesota. My parents divorced when I was 8, and we spent every other weekend at my dad's haunted house in East Bethel. The house had every type of ghost you could think of. A shadow man in a trench coat and brimmed hat, another separate shadow figure that danced down the hallway, a man dressed to go fishing, a doppelganger of my father, 2 giggling little girl ghosts, and many other unseen entities. The dishwasher, radios, and lights would turn themselves on and off randomly. Loud banging would be heard on the walls and the doors. Door handles would jiggle and turn on their own. Feelings of being touched and caressed in the shower were reported. My father had an incident where he felt someone crawl into bed with him in the middle of the night when he was the only one home. My uncle reported hearing 2 little girls giggling and singing in the basement one night while sleeping downstairs. Upon awakening the next morning, he discovered there were no kids in the house that night. One sunny Saturday morning while visiting my dad, my brother and I were up early watching cartoons. I was 8 years old, my brother was 3. As we sat on the couch, we heard 3 knocking sounds on the wall, 5 or 6 feet behind us. Our heads quickly snapped back to look at the wall where the sound was coming from, but we saw nothing. My brother and I quickly turned to look at each other with frightened eyes. I, being the older sister, tried to be brave. I told him it was nothing. As we turned our attention back to the cartoons, my little 8-year-old brain is spinning. What if that banging noise we just heard wasn't just the pipes, as I had been told so many times? What if it was a ghost? I hate when ghosts come around. Why isn't my dad around whenever this happens? As these thoughts swirl in my head, we hear it again. This time it's coming from somewhere in the kitchen off to our left. It's not as loud as the first time, and the sound is different, like someone is knocking on the kitchen counter this time, instead of the wall. We quickly strain our necks and peek inside the kitchen with lightning speed to catch whomever or whatever is making that noise. Again, there is nothing there. I take a deep breath, Once again, I pretend to be brave and tell my brother, "It's nothing, just ignore it." My heart is thumping in my chest, and there are butterflies in my tummy as the familiar anxiety grows worse with each passing second. I tuck myself up on the couch in a ball, not wanting my legs to dangle off the edge. I no longer feel safe. Nothing is to be trusted. This time the sound is coming from the dining room. I can tell the noise is coming from the wooden dining table this time. I can see the entire table from where I'm sitting with ease, and there is nothing on the table that could be making that noise. No one except me and my brother are awake. There is no one in the dining room. There is no logical reason for this knocking noise that seems to be moving around us. Just then, I realize the knocking sound has been moving in a big circle around us. If this invisible entity is to move any closer to us, the next logical place for it to be would be in the living room where me and my brother are currently sitting. No sooner than that thought crossed my mind, it happened again. This time the noise was coming from the coffee table sitting less than 1 foot away from us. I instantly flipped over the back of my couch in a reverse somersault-like motion and ran at superhuman speed to my father's bedroom. In my panic, I completely left my little 3-year-old brother behind to fend for himself. Luckily, he wasn't too far behind. We sneak into our father's room and quietly lay on the floor. Our dad would have been super pissed if we woke him up early on a Saturday morning, even for a ghost. In our commotion, we wake up our 6-year-old sister, who's sleeping on our dad's floor. Us 3 kids always slept on his floor together when we were visiting. So we quietly whisper what just happened out in the living room to our sister. As we're telling her this story, something catches our eye. We can see a black shadow under the small space between the bottom of the door and the plush carpet. This black shadow is slowly pacing back and forth in the hallway, just on the other side of the bedroom door. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like this shadow is waiting for us. Unfortunately, I don't remember what happened after this point. Somehow, the rest of that memory has been lost with time. But I know for sure we didn't open that door. As an adult, I often wish I would have been brave and opened the door. What would have been waiting? Would the entity have entered the room and attacked? Would we have been shocked and confused to find the hallway empty? Would the grey shadow just keep pacing the hallway, oblivious to our frightened, curious eyes? I've done a lot of research on the property over the years, and can't find any evidence of a death or a tragedy that would account for so much paranormal activity. I also reached out to previous and current owners to see if they had any strange experiences. The 2 families who lived there previously said they never had any strange experiences. Neither did the family who lived there right after my family. The family currently living there did not respond to my questions. And in hindsight, I regret even asking them. It wasn't cool of me to even put that thought in their head. Prior to the home being built, all I can find is that the land the house sits on was part of a farm for a family that I could find little information on. So, was my family haunted? Or were we all suffering from mass hysteria for 12+ years?
This happened when I was young, and it has disturbed me far worse than any other experience. When I was 10, my mum had just given birth to my brother. We lived in a small apartment, so this resulted in us moving to a rental home. The home was simple enough, a small brick house near some farmland in southern USA. It was neat because a Native American historical site was within walking distance. I was excited about the move. The first few weeks in the house were normal enough. My stepdad got a new work schedule, so we had to change sleeping arrangements. Before, we would all just sort of watch TV and pass out whenever. His new schedule was getting to work by 4 a.m, so that meant lights out early. I remember being upset that all the lights had to be out early, and I could not fall asleep at that time. Lying awake in pure darkness, I had a feeling of fear coming over me. Next thing I know, I was on the ceiling, looking down at my body. I stayed up there, paralyzed for a few minutes. I will never forget it. Still to this day, 20 plus years later, this is the only time an out-of-body experience has ever happened to me. Of course, I told my mum I was terrified. She says nightmare, but I was not asleep. I remember being tired at school because I stayed awake and turned my closet light on all night until my stepdad woke up. I did not sleep. The next day after school, I fell asleep for a long nap. Pretty much the only time I would get any rest for the next few nights. When the lights out came the next night, I did not sleep. I kept thinking about the ceiling experience. My bedroom was connected to a large open den and hallway where my baby brother's crib was located. This den also had a sliding door to the backyard. I had my door cracked halfway, and as I turned my attention from the ceiling to the door, that's when it started to happen. What I refer to as the fear started to come over me, a tingly, frightening sensation. That's when I saw it. A solid black shadowy figure that wasn't exactly man-shaped but resembled a man is the best way I know how to describe it. The shadow stood there, watching me from outside the doorway. All of a sudden, I felt a pressure on my chest-throat area, like this thing was taking my breath and life right out of me. I wanted to scream, but I could not. Eventually, I could breathe, and the entity just disappeared back to the hallway where it came from, and I went screaming to my mum again. Of course, another nightmare, she says, as I'm falling asleep on the way to school. I remember getting yelled at by teachers for trying to sleep in class. The next night would be my final encounter with the Shadow Man. This time, I begged my mum to leave my light on. She tells me I can turn it back on when stepdad falls asleep. I'm wide awake, scared to death, and nothing happens for a long time. Then the feeling comes, like clockwork. I'm not sure what time these events occur, but if I had to guess, I'd say around midnight. This time the figure appears to float right up beside my bed and put their hands around my neck. The same feeling as before, but closer. I'm terrified but cannot move or breathe, and I am wide awake, sucking the life out of me. Repeat no sleep process until early morning or on the way to school. Repeat mum saying it's a nightmare. Thankfully, stepdad suggests buying me a TV for my room that I kept on all night. I'm not sure if these entities hate the light, but whatever the situation, I never saw the thing again. It doesn't change the fact that I still fear the dark and sleep with the TV on to this day. Before I was never afraid. Before I never cared much about the paranormal. Ever since that week, I research and seek out answers. These things are real, and I do not believe scientists have it all figured out by saying sleep paralysis, because I was never asleep. Mankind has experienced shadow people for centuries. The paranormal is something you have to experience before you can become a believer. Insights would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening. Keep the lights on and stay safe out there.
I can't really say that I believe in ghosts or the paranormal, but I had this experience a while back that I just can't understand. Ever since I was little, it would take me a long time to go to sleep. I'm talking like laying in bed for 3 hours before actually falling asleep. This one night, a few years ago, I remember getting very annoyed because I could not fall asleep. I had been lying in bed for at least 4 hours already. It was around 1 AM, and I had to wake up at 6 AM for school, so I was really trying to fall asleep. At the time, for some reason, I was terrified to sleep in pure darkness, so I had an antique lamp on during all hours of the night. I was well past the age where a nightlight was acceptable to have. I was finally drifting to sleep when I heard a loud slam. I slowly opened my eyes, still very drowsy, being seconds away from peacefully sleeping. Clear as day, I watched my bedroom door, which was previously closed, swing open, then slam again. I watched as my door opened and slammed shut faster and faster. There was nothing I could really do besides watch it. My lamp was on and illuminating the door, so I was able to see that no one was grabbing the doorknob or anything. After at least 2 minutes of me watching my door rapidly open and close, I got kind of fed up. I wasn't scared at all, which is odd. I just ended up mumbling, "Can you stop?" The door slammed one final time, and that was it. I rolled over towards my wall with my back to the door and fell asleep. In the morning, I checked my wall and saw a hole that the doorknob left when it slammed into it, so it definitely wasn't a dream. Still not sure what that was about, but nothing like that has happened since.
Background: I was around 15 when this happened. I lived in a house with an upper floor and complete basement. The staircase to the second floor has no door at either ends. The staircase to the basement only had a door at the entrance, only on the first floor. Both staircases were L-shaped and had landings separating the turns. The space where the staircases met was as large as 2 door frames smushed together. At the time, my mum was busy working on her computer on the second floor. My dad was running an errand, but I didn't know that piece of info until he got home. The doppelganger was posing as my dad. To avoid confusion, I will refer to it as him in my story. My dad will be Dad. Now that that is out of the way, here is the actual story. I went downstairs to the first floor to probably get some water or a snack. I don't remember. As I approached the last few stairs, I caught him exiting the basement. He was standing on the hardwood floor of the first floor, only a step away from the door. Being the nice daughter I was, I went to say hi instead of doing my task. As I approached him, he went back down the stairs to the basement at a familiar pace. He wasn't rushed or anything like that when he descended the stairs. Him didn't say a single word to me. I was confused but thought nothing of it. I followed him, but I stopped by the door frame. At this point, he had traveled a few steps from the door. Him kept eye contact with me, but angled his body in a way that made sure he wouldn't fall. I was in the process of saying hey to him until I was struck by electricity. This electricity felt raw and alluring, though it felt sour and very wrong as it pulsed throughout my body. Like it didn't belong in this universe, but not in the evil sense. This electricity had only lasted for a second or two before fading. For whatever the reason, I couldn't stop talking. It was like my off switch was broken. I knew that I didn't need to fear him despite that electricity. Maybe that is why I blathered on. Who knows? I certainly didn't. As I continued to talk, our eye contact never broke. Then, I hear my mum yelling down to me. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. I yelled back up, "I'm talking to Dad." After a few moments, I hear my mum walking down to the landing of the staircase leading to the second floor. She told me that Dad was on an errand. Just want to remind you that my eyes remained on him while I talked with my mum. Him eventually reached the landing and had his entire body facing me. Then my brain finally began registering what my mum had said, though that was short-lived when I heard my dad thumping up the stairs to our porch. My mum was walking the rest of the way down and asked me again who I was talking to. Since she was closer, I looked up to her to respond until I heard the doorknob twist. I looked out to the front door, then turned to face my mum and said, "See, I was talking to Dad," or something along those lines. Coincidentally, my dad had just entered the door when my mum had made it to the first floor. The doppelganger was nowhere in sight when I turned my attention back to the landing. My dad looked so confused as to what I said, and my mum's stare. Then I quickly went back upstairs, worried about having to explain myself further. That never happened, but I was still very confused about what had just happened. Sometime between my blathering and my conversation with my mum, I was sitting on the floor instead of standing. I also swear that I saw something like worry or surprise register on him after the electricity. It may have also been wishful thinking. I swear to you guys that this is a true story, and I remember it in vivid detail, as you can probably tell by the reading. I also wanted to add that the doppelganger was in a recognizable outfit of a thick, long green and white jersey with faded jeans. My dad wore this outfit often, especially during the winter. My dad was in some sort of long-sleeved red t-shirt and lightly worn jeans. This has never happened before or since, though I would like to say that the doppelganger loves to taunt me from time to time. There are occasions when I hear my parents' voices off in the distance, then being told that they are on some sort of errands. Sadly, I don't have evidence of it being the doppelganger, or a ghost, or something else entirely. Have you guys ever come face to face with a doppelganger?
So I've had a few paranormal experiences in my life thus far. Some frightening stuff, but nothing that was actually dangerous in retrospect. I recently started a security job in a bank. I work overnight and monitor the entirety of the building's interior, as well as patrols of the exterior. The building is 6 stories, with only the bottom one actually being the functional bank. The upper floors are mainly untouched, outdated offices, with a few being rented by businesses. No one whatsoever is in the building of a nighttime, and surveillance doesn't cover the upper floors because they're so well separated from the bank. While doing my rounds of the upper levels and checked ever unlocked rooms, i.e. bathrooms, closets, mechanical rooms, storage spaces, stairwells, the whole 9 yards, didn't find anything as usual. But while I was on the 4th floor, I heard someone call my name and heard a door close. Of course, I was freaked out, but I pushed through the fear and tried to stay rational. I did a second sweep of the floor again. Nothing. Then I got really scared. I got to the stairwell on the floor and opened the door to listen. Stairwells echo really badly, so we are taught to be silent and listen for intruders. While I'm standing there, head peeking through the door, I don't hear anything, until I do. 2 men's voices came from the stairwell, I'm assuming up it. I announced myself and started up, but found nothing and didn't hear any doors open or close, which I should have. Then I'm at the last flight, up to the roof, and I hear loud steps running upstairs. I'm absolutely terrified and prepare myself for a physical altercation. Weapons at the ready, I wait for the perp to come to me because I'm on high ground. The steps sound close enough that I should be able to see the person causing them, but I don't. Then I hear labored breathing with the steps and still see nothing. Next thing I know, I'm physically pushed back. I didn't fall very far, more like collapsed into the stairs behind me. The sounds continue on the roof door, and to my shock, it opens with a bang and then shuts. I actually saw it open and shut. It's normally locked, so I go secure it and call the cops, but when I get to it, it's locked. I have absolutely no explanation for this. I've never been pushed or physically touched by an entity, and I'm shaken badly. Honestly, I went outside for the rest of the night and stayed in FaceTime with a close friend that also works night shift. I spoke to my supervisor and had him pull up the cameras. You could see that I didn't just fall down, I was physically pushed in the lobby, but there's absolutely nothing on the cameras. He said that that was crazy, and asked if I had double-checked all the doors when I told him about the incident on the stairwell. He said that aside from double-checking all doors and rooms, there's nothing to be done. If it's not an intruder, then there isn't anything that anyone else can do about it. I'm just afraid that things will intensify, since these are the first encounters I've had. On top of this, the next night, I'm sitting in the lobby with elevators behind me. Again, no one in the building, and I hear the outdated elevator go up some floors, stop, and shift with weight entering it, then come back down. I'm absolutely terrified as it touched down and the doors opened. No one in sight, but when I get up to look closer, steps pound towards me, push me over, then run up the stairwell adjacent to the elevator. I'm terrified of this building. I'm the first female guard they've hired. It's a newer company. The men I've spoken to don't experience anything. It pays too good to quit, but I'm at a loss of what to do. I've had a few experiences before, but nothing this intense. I was a believer before this job, but I viewed the paranormal as a curiosity and didn't take it entirely seriously. That has changed now. It's just so difficult to believe that these things have ill intent for me. I'm not religious, so I don't really feed on the demonic and evil stuff, but this has made me question some things for sure. When I started my job, I thought my biggest problems would be drug addicts outside the building and people trying to break in. I'm sure most people that are into ghosts or the paranormal have heard about the Menga Hotel. It has a long history and has seen its fair share of events, so I will not bore you with the history. It doesn't hurt that it's parked next to the Alamo either. I love the Menga, and not because it produces some of my favorite encounters, but because it's a great old hotel and the staff there are always on the point. I'm not much of a modern hotel guy. I like a hotel with history and charm, instead of a modern look or a bunch of extras I don't use, and the Menga has just the right amount of it. This will be a collection of encounters I have had during my many stays there. The story starts off pretty boring. I booked there because I went to do a site review for a job and wanted to stay in a haunted hotel, and they said the Menga was the place. Needless to say, the first stay didn't produce results, and even the ghost tour was pretty standard. But hey, it was well done, and I learned the history. The next trip back was a different story. I booked there again because this time, I just liked the hotel and staff. I checked in, went up to my room, which is located on the Alamo side, unlike the first time. I passed a mirror in the hallway that overlooked the balcony, and on the other side, I saw a woman dressed in period clothing. At first, I thought it was one of the ghost tour ladies, cause that's how they dressed, but by the time I whipped my head around to look at her, there wasn't anyone there. I shook my head and thought I was overlaying the painting from downstairs in my head. However, when I got closer to my room door, there is another mirror at the end of the hallway, and I saw her in the reflection again. I turned around to see if anyone was there, and there was no one. That made me uneasy, but I smiled and thought that this was going to be a good trip. Even if I didn't experience another thing, the whole trip was worth it. Well, it didn't stop there. Later that night, I was getting ready to go out to dinner. My bathroom light came on all by itself, and no joke, it looked like there was a shadow being cast onto the floor coming out of the bathroom. I walked over and looked in, and couldn't find a reason for the shadow, which I was now standing on. Well, I quickly finished getting ready and went to dinner. I needed a drink. At dinner, my client asked how I liked the manga, and I told him I loved it. He asked if I had seen any shadows without people attached to them. I told him about the mirror woman, but not the shadow in the bathroom. I wanted to figure that one out first. I got back to my room, and the light was off in the bathroom. As I walked by, I said thank you for turning it off, half joking. I put my stuff down and returned to the bathroom and turned the light on. No shadow. I tried some different things to make it happen, but nothing close, and all I keep thinking was there was a ghost laughing his ass off watching me try and figure it out. The night finished out quietly, and except for the shadows under the door that I just took as people walking by quietly, nothing else was worth talking about. The next trip ramped up a bit. When I checked in this time, I asked if I could have the same side that I did last time, and they gave me one that I could look right out over the Alamo courtyard. That was cool. So this time I had a bit more time because it was an install. It started off boring the first day. That night, I decided to go take a ghost tour of downtown. The next day, nothing during the day, and then I went to dinner. As I came back, there was a tour going on in the hotel, but I was tired from the day. I went to bed after watching some TV, and a couple of hours later, there was a bright light coming from outside. I had forgotten to close the curtains before I went to bed. As I was closing them, I noticed the light was a street light across the way, and under was a little gate, and in front of the gate there was a person standing there, and I noticed that it looked like a monk or someone in a long robe and hood. What was odd was that I could see through him in areas like wherever the light would hit him. In the shadowed areas, he looked as real as anything. I watched him for a moment just to make sure he wasn't just some dude. So when I finally thought to get my phone, I reached over, and when I came back, nothing was there. I felt bummed out and went back to bed. The next night was my last night for this trip, and did the normal dinner drinks with the client and then to bed. I had an early flight, so wanted some sleep. As I walked down my hallway, I saw a shadow banking off the wall. I continue walking down the hallway after looking at it for a moment, because the problem is that there is no light source or door there. There was no reason for there to be a shadow of a person on the wall. It's like a light from a room was behind a person, and it cast a shadow on the wall opposite of the room. Just there isn't a room there, or even a light source. As I got closer, it just disappeared, like someone closed the door. I went over and looked around for the light source or something like that, but couldn't find anything that would do the trick, so I walked back to my room. As I got to the door, I saw a shadow under the door pass by, like someone was on the other side. I opened the door, half expecting someone to jump me from behind the door, but nothing. I finished the night without any more surprises and left with some interesting stories. The latest trip right before the virus hit was weird. I was on the other side of the hotel, the original part, and was coming to my room after a meeting when I thought I almost ran into someone coming out of my room. I pivoted back to miss them, but when I looked to see who I almost hit, there wasn't anyone there or in the area. When I finally got into my room, my bed was made. Quick note about me, I dislike my sheets tucked in. What made me a bit upset was the fact that I put the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. I called down to the desk to ask why someone felt the need to clean my room when I asked for it not to be. They said they hadn't started cleaning yet. I told them someone was just here, and I almost ran into them. The nice guy on the phone said, "Oh, you just met Sally." He apologized for her overexcited work ethic. However, he let me know there isn't anything they could do to stop her from doing her job, because she's a ghost. We both laughed and hung up, and I then asked Sally that if she was going to make the bed again, please don't tuck the sheets in. Sally White was one of the Menga Hotel's most beloved staff members during the late 19th century. On March 28th of 1876, her husband Harry Wheeler's jealousy would take a deadly turn. He shot her once in the lower abdomen, and when she squirmed out of his tight grasp, He fired again and shot her just to the left of her spine. Sally White died 2 days later on one of the third-level floors of the original part of the hotel. That night I was sleeping and keep feeling a cold breeze on my feet, like the sheets were being lifted off of my feet. I keep moving them to put them back under the covers, but keep feeling the breeze. Finally, I said, "Okay, I get why you tucked them in." After that, I think she let me be. The next day I was flying out and left a tip and a note that said, "Sorry Sally, I didn't understand the importance of the sheets getting tucked in. Thank you for all the hard work you do." I got an email from the hotel thanking me for the note to Sally. Apparently she gets a lot of thank you notes. I haven't been back yet since things have opened back up, but I would look forward to it and can't wait to see what other encounters I can have. I wouldn't mind a meeting with Teddy or the Duke, that would be pretty cool. However, like I said, it wouldn't matter. The Menga and the staff is why I go back, including Sally.